Good afternoon, everyone. This is a regular board meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District. It's October 6th, and it is 1:20. I'd like to ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Yes, Madam President. Director Coffey.
Present.
Director Rosario. Director Eccles.
Here.
Here.
Director Lane.
Here.
Director Wieskamp.
Here.
Director Wasby.
Here.
Madam President.
I'm here. Thank you so much. Director Lane, would you like to lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Of course, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Someday.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Director Lane. So today's meeting is held in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order allowing for board members to participate remotely during the pandemic. We're also providing live audio and video streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to submit written comments and call in for public comments for an item on a staff report, or they can also call in and leave a voice message. And I would like to ask the clerk to please explain the 3 ways people can participate.
Yes, Madam President. The 3 ways that people can participate publicly are via email by sending it to myself at yburial@ebparks.org, via voicemail 510-544-2016, leaving a message about the item that you'd like to discuss, and/or coming into the Zoom meeting at the link that's provided on the agenda. And those are the 3 ways.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have any questions before we proceed, board members? Everybody okay? All right. I know you had an opportunity to take a look at the agenda. Motion is in order for approval of the agenda.
So move.
Moved by Director Wieskamp,
Second.
seconded by Director Rosario. Please call the roll on the approval of the agenda.
Yes, Madam President. Director Coffey.
Aye.
Director Eccles.
Aye.
Director Wieskamp.
Aye.
Director Wasby.
Aye.
Director Lane.
Aye.
Director Rosario.
Aye.
And Madam President.
Aye.
Thank you. It's unanimously approved.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We do not have any public comments. We have one member of the public that is going to have a comment on an item that is already on the calendar.
Okay, so that'll be a little later in the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you so very much. So the next item on our agenda today is our special update under C, our general manager's update on the status of East Bay Regional Park District emergency during our COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm very happy to report today that after 7 months of dealing with COVID and getting our protocols in place, working with our staff, we have no new incidents of potential infections. And that is not by accident. That's by the great job staff is doing, working with our unit managers and working with the entire team to follow the protocols. We enthusiastically embrace wearing masks and proud of it. We look at it not only our duty to keep our staff safe and the public safe, but just as something to help any way we can with what's going on after all these months of this terrible infection and virus. We also are dealing with fires and smoke. This has been the worst smoke year we've had since recent time. And we just want to acknowledge the continual effort by our fire department, our permanent firefighting staff, their leadership, and of our on-call firefighters to protect and defend our East Bay Hills and our regional parks, while at the same time being available to help our communities and help CAL FIRE across the state. I particularly want to acknowledge our OES team up in Sonoma County and Napa County, who were featured in the Press Democrat, the mighty Press Democrat of Santa Rosa, who helped stop a fire near Annandale State Park and a subdivision near the Spring Lake Regional Park. I got a really nice note from Burt Whitaker, the general manager of Sonoma County Regional Parks, thanking our team. He said, yet again, because they were there in the last fires. I want to point out also, because we have been dealing with the history of fires in the East Bay Hills, repeated fires in the same geographic area. The new glass fire is literally burning the donut hole from the fire of the Tubbs fire and the other fires that were up in Napa and Sonoma before. So when I looked at the CAL FIRE historic maps, that same area has burnt repeatedly. So we clearly up there have an area that's just focused on the wind patterns and the hill patterns and the dryness that's going to continue to have these fires. And the same thing happened earlier with the fire near Paradise again. So we're seeing, like the Oakland Hills, where 17 fires happened since the early 20s in the same general location, this pattern of repeated fires in the urban interface. The difference is where these were farmlands and ranch lands, now they are ungrazed, they have homes in them, they are just have grown tremendously. People love to live in the woods, but we've made some very big mistakes in our planning to protect people. It is just not possible to stop these fires. And it really appears with climate change that we're only going to see more. So we have to do a much better job at not only do fuels management, but on evacuation patterns and on infrastructure. It is just a very, very sad time. We're now looking at 4 million acres and the largest fire in the state's history of 1 million acres. So this fire situation is not sustainable. We need an army of help to help all local agencies to address fuel management and fire suppression, but to continue to do that work throughout the year. And I will be recommending to the board this year that we add an additional fire crew to the budget. I hope the board will support that. So we will have 2 fire crews working in the East Bay Hills. They will all be red carded, so they will be trained to fight fires as well as they have been doing with our first crew. I think that's just a part of our climate reality, our climate adaptation, and of doing our duty to protect our parks. And I think that's a very important issue. I also wanted to really pay attention to our latest reopenings. We have reopened camping in our 2 campgrounds at 50% by reservation, no open fires. And we're getting a good response in reservations. We have reopened lake fishing, including boat inspection. That is a tremendous amount of work by operations. And also we are going back to what we had before COVID with a great campaign on allowing dogs off leash, but having your puppy be a pro in the parks to help us keep our parks clean, safe, respect that we have animals grazing in the parks, specifically to reduce fuel load in our parks and to get people to really understand they have a responsibility to love their parks, but do it with their dogs on a leash when there's animals grazing in the parks. And so that is rolling out as well. So we have a lot going on. We have a lot to manage and a lot of challenges, sometimes very overwhelming. But I really am pleased with AGM O'Connor, his staff, public safety, for continuing to find ways we can provide our mission, which is parks, to more people in this time of need and to do it safely. So it's with great respect and pride of all the staff from bottom to the top who have continued to find ways to reopen our parks during this terrible pandemic. So thanks to everyone, and thank you, board, for supporting those efforts. I think the public is really appreciating them. That's really my update for today. If you have questions of staff, either from public safety or operations, they are here and ready to go. But again, just kudos to the team who've been doing these reopenings, and kudos to our wonderful, well-trained, dedicated fire department. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. GM, and thank you for both bringing us the sobering news about the continuing fires that we are now just part of an earlier fire season and so hard to deal with. And thank you for your diligence and looking forward to having more people help with fighting fires, not only fighting fires, but trying to keep them from starting in the first place. Thank you for the good news that our employees are healthy and doing well. And thank you to all the staff, obviously, who are out there making all these wonderful things happen and, you know, making sure we keep people safe. So thank you so much. There was some good news in there, so that was good. Yeah.
If I may, I just wanted to, because I know that's a concern of every board member, with our going into, again, still later season for the winds, the Diablo winds, that we are prepared to immediately put out any notice to close parks because of red flag. As I think most of the board knows, parts of Grizzly Peak Boulevard were closed to protect people from potential fires. And so we are ready if we get the message from the weather and CAL FIRE and our fire chief, if we need to make those announcements to close parks based on weather. And we're prepared. We just are very hopeful that we may get some rain, and hopefully no lightning, just rain.
Oh, God, no.
So very important. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. GM. Director Rosario has his hand up.
Thank you. Regarding the campgrounds, when campers or when the public is making reservation, are we encouraging them to or letting them know that they should be wearing masks when they interface with park staff and other campers?
Yes, our parks are well signed, including the bathrooms and the campgrounds. In addition to the whole parks are very well signed on masks are required, not in your campsite, but maybe Jim has a specific comment on that. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Jim. You have that pretty well covered. I went out to the campgrounds, both at Del Valle and Anthony Chabot on Friday. They're well signed. Staff are well prepared. We have scripts that we're using for reservations, Director Rosario. And I can send you a few pictures of the signage that we have in the campground. We also have some social distancing markings on the ground for the restrooms where there's typically a pinch point in the campground. So I think staff have done a really great job of setting it up for success.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good news too. Thank you. All right, any other comments on item C? Yes, Director Lane.
Yes, so since both Alameda and Contra Costa County have moved into the red stripe, which means indoor museums may open, I wonder what our plans are for opening our visitor centers. They would need to only allow 25% of what we have had in the past. But I know people are missing those visitor centers.
Jim?
Director Elaine, I knew you would be asking that question today.
Surprise question, yeah.
I have asked Chief Kassabaum to work with her staff to work on a reopening plan for the visitor centers. We've already been working on a plan for reopening Ardenwood, that a plan that actually staff was generating on reopening that. So we're on it and probably looking at some time in early to mid-November.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Any other Any others on this item? Okay, thank you so much, everybody. We're on to the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, are there any items that members wish to ask questions about or pull from the consent calendar?
There were several items that board members asked. Directors Lane and Director Rosario had their questions answered, as did Director Coffey and Director Corbett. I am not sure though if Director Coffey has seen all of his answers, or you, Madam President.
Director Coffey?
I haven't seen an answer to my question regarding our history over the last 4 years of applying for Measure AA Bay Restoration funding and the geographic issues involved in that.
So you're talking item N.
Item N. I, however, would take that offline. It's just a very straightforward where we applied and how the results over the last 4 years ensued from those applications. And frankly, it's just another topic that I don't think we should take up time for. So I will take that answer offline from staff.
Yeah, the answer has been sent to you, so you can take a look at that.
I just checked a couple minutes ago, but I'll check again. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Director Waspy, did I see your hand go up?
Yes, you did.
I just had a question on number H and L. Letter
H. Okay.
Did you say
H and L.
just
Yes.
H and L?
H and L, yes.
Okay.
And Madam Clerk, for me, I did get most of my questions answered, but I didn't get my question answered for item J, and I just wanted to make a comment on item M. And I just need some direction. I understand we may have someone who wants to comment on item D.
Correct.
So I don't know when we're going to.
He is here.
Okay, so we can maybe do that before we take our questions on the consent calendar.
Yes.
And
Yes,
then also
we can do that.
on item F, will we be having a public welcome on item F at some point in the agenda?
We can do it as if you call out the item F, Deputy General Manager Dr. Alvarez, we can do that and allow an opportunity for Ms. Picard to speak to you.
Okay, so we'll take F and D off for now. Is that what we should do?
Or we could have the public comment on, the comment on D.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's go forward with our public comment on D. Then we'll be able to take questions on the items and then move forward on the consent calendar after that. Sounds
That's
good.
fabulous, yes.
Right, I'll let you
Paul,
set it up.
yeah, Paul Ferrario is already here. He's going to be commenting on item D. Let me read that, Paul. It is resolution to support Proposition 15, tax on commercial and industrial properties of 2020. Mr. Ferrario, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members and staff. My name is Paul Ferrario, and I respectfully request that the board not endorse Proposition 15 because of how the authors have targeted farmers and ranchers. Yes, government could always use more money, especially in light of CalPERS retirement funding issues. As a Park District employee, I'm very grateful that we're well funded compared to a lot of cities and agencies, but Prop 15 is not the answer. 95% of California's 77,000 farms are family owned. I could share source data if needed. Farming is a low margin operation. Annual operating loans from financial institutions are the norm. From the state legislature's analyst office and the California Assessors Association, we have the following. Quote, Prop 15 will expose farmers and ranchers to steep property tax hikes on all fixtures and improvements. And from Robert Spiegel, property policy advocate for the California Farm Bureau, we have this, quote, proponents claim that the initiative explicitly exempts California farms and ranches, meaning that the protections afforded to farmers by Prop 13 would remain unchanged. But read the initiative. As defined, quote, real property used for commercial agricultural production means land that is used for producing commercial agricultural commodities, unquote. The language is cleverly deceptive because, quote, real property, unquote, as currently defined elsewhere, consists of three elements: land, improvements, and fixtures. This initiative only exempts land, not any improvements or fixtures attached to that land. So we would be looking at much higher taxes on dairy barns, food processing facilities, orchards, wineries. All of these would be reassessed at fair market value. Solar panels would be reassessed at high taxes. On the one hand, we all like solar panels, but on the other hand, this is a punitive thing. Finally, there's environmental implications because Prop 15 would give local governments a great financial incentive to rezone farmland to industrial or commercial. Like we're seeing now, farmers and ranchers are doing a good job at sequestering carbon in their operations, working with the air quality districts to get that achieved. So again, I urge you to not endorse Prop 15. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. All righty. We'll go on to the next item, which is item F. DGM Alvarez, I believe, is going to speak.
Yes, thank you, Director Corbett. Deputy General Manager, Dr. Ana Alvarez, at your service. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Ms. Allison Picard. It's part of your item on your consent calendar that if approved, she will be appointed as the interim Human Resources Chief Operating Officer. And Ms. Picard comes with a very deep background in the human resources field, specifically in the public sector. And just to give you an idea of how blessed we are to have her contribute and partner with us as we shepherd the Park District's internal infrastructure, which I like to consider that are the people behind the mission of the East Bay Regional Park District. Ms. Picard will bring to the table a very broad perspective in the public sector, as she has worked in public agencies ranging from local municipalities, cities, counties, and even regional transportation agencies like BART. And I appreciate that piece from her because she understands how important it is that we preserve and sustain the public's trust as we make those difficult decisions or easy decisions in managing our people that deliver every day the mission of the East Bay Regional Park District. So with that, and with your concurrence, Director Corbett, maybe perhaps Ms. Allison can say a few words to you and the public.
Yes, please, Ms. Picard, you're welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. Well, Dr. Alvarez stole my thunder. That was exactly how I feel about working in HR and the vital function that
This.
Yes, she's there.
There
yes,
you are.
good afternoon. Yeah. Good afternoon, Madam President, members of the board. This is Lisa Gorgon, Chief of Design and Construction, and I'm going to introduce the item and then Ren Bates, Capital Program Manager, will give the presentation. But I just wanted to highlight that this is a really exciting stage in the development of the Tidewater Day Use Project. The item before you is to approve a contract to begin phase 1, as Director Corbett just read out. This will allow us to prepare the site to accommodate sea level rise and complete site stabilization so that as funding for the access improvements become available, the site will be shovel ready. Additionally, we wanted to just recognize, to take a moment, that this site is within an industrial area that is not easily accessible to the historically disadvantaged neighborhoods to the east. With phase 1 construction beginning, we have initiated coordination with our colleagues in operations, grants, public affairs, and government affairs to talk about meaningful opportunities for engagement and outreach and partnership building so that when the park is developed, when it's finished, we'll have some programmatic processes in place to overcome some of the physical barriers, such as 880, to ensure that the park really is, in the neighborhood, they're connected and the park is welcoming and accessible. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ren.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for highlighting that at the beginning of this presentation. I think it is extremely important when we pick up these great little pieces of property that are a little harder to access. I think it's so important that we connect them with the neighborhood. So really, really appreciate your comments on that. Thank you. Welcome, Ren.
Thank you, President Corbett, board members. Thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. Bear with me one sec while I share my screen. Pull up the presentation. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, again, this is about Tidewater Day Use Area. It's my pleasure to present this phase 1 update and to bring this agenda item forward. Here's the recommendation. The recommendation of this agenda item has 4 authorizations for it, and these will all be highlighted in the presentation. I won't bother to read this. It's been stated, it's in the packet in front of you. Here we are as a vicinity map. This Tidewater Day Use Area is within Martin Luther King Jr. shoreline. It is adjacent to the existing Tidewater Boating Center. Here's a map with a blow up to a more localized map. And then even further zooming in, here is the park map itself. The area we are talking about is an 8-acre project zone, which is located here. The Tidewater Boating Center is located here off of Tidewater and High Street in Oakland. San Leandro Bay it's on the San Leandro Bay. Other thing to note is that we are also, just in general reference, the location of the Doolittle SF Bay Trail project that we've been talking and in development on is over here. As a reminder, here's the final concept plan that was developed in 2017 and 2018. As a reminder, in 2018, the Park District engaged in public involvement with this project. There was an on-site meeting. There was a meeting held elsewhere in close proximity that was more amenable to an evening program. And also online surveys were done to solicit input from stakeholders and community members. That input was integrated into the design, and the design also incorporates sea level rise, parking, a new play area, outdoor classroom, and restroom. And as a reminder, this concept was approved by the Board Executive Committee in September of 2018. At that time, based on the input and realizing that sea level rise would be crucial to this project, it was determined to split the project into 2 phases. And so we are prepared to move ahead with phase 1. Here's an image of the existing site conditions. The boating center are these buildings with an existing parking lot. Currently, there is also a parking, which is a fenced in parking and boat storage area is utilized by the Oakland Strokes, which is the district's partner in utilizing the boating center facility here. It is within the 8-acre site that we're proposing to develop. Also to note that SF Bay Trail currently exists and winds around the site at the perimeter. That will remain in operating condition as we develop the site. And you can see from this aerial image that it's a fairly denuded site. There's not a lot of vegetation on it. That's a result of the previous use being a chassis storage facility for storage containers, the FlexiVan site. They cleared out most of the site when they left. The one remnant building is this metal structure, which will be removed as phase 1. And here is the scope of phase 1. This is, again, the reason for this action is to authorize award of a contract to complete this work. So the scope of the work is to import fill for sea level rise resiliency. It's also to surcharge and compact the subgrade. So when we're speaking of this, to be more specific and clear, is that when the boating center was developed, this is all, the subgrade here is mostly bay mud. And so it is not structurally sound and is likely to settle as weight is placed on it. So if we go back to this, you can see that a lot of our development here is parking lot and the entry plaza and restroom. And so I guess one thing I should note that I did not state in the beginning is the accommodation for sea level rise. We're proposing to fill basically this area in here, which will protect most of the improvements that are there and allowing some sort of horizontal displacement, or as the sea level rises, there'll be land here that will be lost. So the Bay Trail may be lost, and these are for 50-year predictions for sea level rise. So what would happen is the Bay Trail could then be realigned along the edge of this berm here to make it whole. But back to the point of the surcharge is that in this parking lot, we would like to, as you can see here, we want to bring in fill that we can then replace and remove as we develop phase 2 to accommodate all that. But we wanted to surcharge the area so that the bay mud would settle, so that as we developed and built the improvements, we wouldn't get any sort of cracking in the parking lot, for instance, because of the settlement. And this became apparent in the development of the boating center. The restroom needed some special lightweight fill because it would have settled more. So we're, based on the fact that we have time, we are moving forward and we're proposing to surcharge this area, bringing in the fill for that reason. The other aspects of this are to relocate the utilities. They currently come down this EVMA easement. EVMA stands for Emergency Vehicle and Maintenance Access. We'll also demolish this utility building. The new utilities will come down Lesser Street, which is our main access point. It will be within pavement. It'll be rights we have continuous rights to, and it will enter so that we don't have, the other thing is that the utilities are underground. So by surcharging, there could be more weight on those utilities. We're trying to remove that risk by bringing them down Lesser and relocating those for all to maintain service at the Tidewater Boating Center and then for the future development here. The action is the district received a proposal from Preston Pipeline. Preston Pipeline is a contractor in the Bay Area that does a lot of dirt movement. They're moving dirt into Oyster Bay for the district. The proposal that they have is much less than our engineer's estimate on the magnitude of around 400K. And the reason for that is that they're proposing to import the fill at no cost, which is a great benefit. The other benefit of Preston Pipeline is that they are an approved PG&E contractor, which means that they can do the improvements or the installation of the utilities. The district will have Preston Pipeline, who's approved, can install the utilities, and so we wouldn't have to wait for PG&E to come back and install those. So by aggregating all of these different scopes of work and getting Preston Pipeline to give us a cost proposal, the district is receiving much benefit at a cost savings. So that's why we're proposing a sole source. Here's our funding. We need $250,000 from WW. That's one of the actions of this agenda item. As a reminder, the board just approved in, I believe, the last board meeting, the appropriation of Prop 68 funds. So $1.5 million of that was allocated to Tidewater, which, as this graph shows, brings us to just 250K shy of what we need to complete phase 1. So the other action is to authorize the appropriation and transfer of money, WW funds, to this project so that we can complete phase 1. And in summary, staff recommends that we move forward with these improvements. As a reminder, this phased approach is consistent with the previous board exec committee updates. We have a proposal from a contractor that is less than the engineer's estimate, and funding is, we need minor funding from Measure WW as we just received Prop 68. And the other thing is that this will button up the site, make it shovel ready, and phase 2 can happen when funds become available. As a final note, I'd like to say that I acknowledge Toby Perry, project manager, doing his excellent work on this to move it forward. And he just spoke with Preston Pipeline, and they are very excited about this being presented to the board. They love to work for the Park District and get this project moving forward. So with that, I'll place the recommendation up in front of you one last time. Hopefully we've addressed, the one thing that I did not address is that we are amending PlaceWorks contract. When we originally entered into agreement with PlaceWorks, they were not scoped for 2 phases. So subsequent to development, we've split this into 2 phases, and this amendment to their contract will provide their services for construction administration and assistance as we have these improvements installed. That ends my presentation. I will stop sharing my screen and be happy to field any questions.
Thank you very much, Ren. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this beautiful project? Let's see. I don't see any hands up. Okay, I'll make a quick comment. Thank you very much. I'm happy to see us moving forward. You know, us board members, we always like to see things move faster, but I think that this is a really smart move to do what's needed to be done and to take advantage of pipeline's ability to bring us fill. And in the long run, I think it'll make it a better project as we get the site ready and the soil ready. And I did want to just comment, we did get a letter prior to the executive committee meeting last week where someone was concerned about compacted soil, and the park district staff, Ren and Lisa probably, responded like almost immediately to address the concerns that the constituent had raised, who was worried that the compacted soil might not create a good place for our great native vegetation that we're going to plant would be able to prosper. However, they were able to explain that the compaction that he was concerned about was not going to be in the areas where the planting were going to be, and that the site would be ripped. And I'm smiling because Ren taught me about that. It would be ripped, and soil and compost would come in to allow for a much better place for the plants to grow. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for responding so quickly to the constituent. And I'm looking forward to a very beautiful little park that I think if we can address those access issues will be of great benefit to the neighborhoods nearby. So thank you for all of that. And if there's no other comments, motion's in order.
You should move it. I will move it, but I'd be glad to second if you want to move it, Ellen.
Okay, it's in my district. I'll move it, and Director Wieskamp will second it.
Dear to your heart.
On that motion, thank you, Director Wieskamp. On that motion, I just do want to add that Director Rosario is smiling because this is his former neighborhood, and
right.
he's looking forward to it as well. So on that, if the clerk can please call the roll.
Yes, Madam President. Director Wasby?
Aye.
Director Eccles?
Aye.
Director Rosario?
Aye.
Director Lane?
Aye.
Director Coffey?
Aye.
Director Wieskamp?
Aye.
Madam President Corbett?
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody.
Unanimously.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, staff, too. Now, the next item, item B, is authorization to enter into lease revenue allocation agreement with the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy and transfer lease revenues for establishment of a permanent endowment fund for long-term management of our HCP preserved lands. And according to my script, I believe the presenter will be Christina Kelchner, AGM of Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development. Do I have that right?
President Corbett, I'll do a bit of introduction because of the long history of working.
Oh, yes, please. You're not on my script. Sorry about that.
I just want to say this is a very important decision today. It's actually a complex decision, but a great decision. We have been in partnership with the Habitat Conservancy when it was just an idea. And to date, over $60 million in property has been added to that area. It's really quite a success story. When the agencies approved the original plan for this for the HCP, both state and federal, they made a requirement that long-term funding for the natural resource management of those endangered species had to be created. The Habitat Conservancy, and I think Abby is here today, created a permit process where they're getting funding into a bank account, but that bank account isn't big enough at this point to manage all this property or the future property. As development occurs, they're all paying in through housing to build out their general plans, including Contra Costa County, and transportation to mitigate the impacts from all that new development. So about 2 years ago, we started discussing where the long-term investment of these funds would reside. And it was agreed to that our Regional Park Foundation would hold the funds and manage in consultation with the Conservancy, the investment of those funds. The purpose of the funds is specifically to manage the natural resource requirements of those properties that were acquired. The district also will have to fund its park-related portions of that. So, for example, for the board, I want the public and the board to understand, if we leave it in land bank, the dominant cost there is managing the natural resources, grazing, fire roads, weeds, restoration projects. If we open it up to the public and build a picnic area or build a road or build a staging area or open those parks, that is our responsibility. The recreation component is a responsibility of the district. So our partnership is that we have a calculation that will be made called the PAR that determines what the natural resource responsibilities are for the HCP. Today, you are making a decision based on the lease revenue that the district has been collecting, not the HCP and the Habitat Conservancy, but the lease collections on that land we now own and manage has been coming to the district. And we have an agreement with the Conservancy on how those monies will be spent. You're taking the majority of those monies from the lease revenue and moving that to the foundation so they can join that to start building this fund. And I'll let Abby and Christine explain the amounts is significant over time. But I wanted you to understand, where does that money come from? It came from the lease wind turbines. It came from communication sites that were shared. And a large portion of that is funding our entire staff out in East County, Brushy Peak, Vasco Caves, all those areas that have received HCP property. The HCP through those lease revenues those costs are being funded through the lease revenues. When this proposal came forward, we said, what if the lease revenue no longer covers the cost of the HCP shares, the Conservancy shares, to be able to fund the staff? So that's what we've been negotiating. We've reached an agreement that seems very equitable and fair. And that's that amount that's being transferred into the eventual large fund that will grow and grow to manage these properties in the future. So I wanted you to have that overview. Fairly complicated, different sources of money, but the whole point was was not, if you think of the Great Recession, there wasn't a lot of building going on. So the permitting that's going to pay long-term through housing development, that took a while. Plus there was litigation from a certain East County developer who challenged the fees. So we won't discuss that today. But so all this is delayed building that fund up. And that's why we've been basically living off of the lease revenues for our staff to do that management. So the HCP has been very good. Well, if we say we need a truck, if we need a shovel, whatever we need to manage these properties, they've been very good about approving that funding for those parks. So I wanted to give you that interview and now have the staff make their presentation.
All right, thank you very much. AGM Kelchner. Thank you, Mr. GM.
Thank you, General Manager Doyle. My slides up here. Christina Kelchner, AGM of Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development. and General Manager has given the board an excellent overview. So I'll just go over some of the details. The partnership with the Habitat Conservancy is a complicated one. The action today is relatively narrow, and we will be back to the board in the future with additional items, certainly for this partnership. So as General Manager mentioned, what we are talking about today is the use of lease revenues that have been generated on many of the properties that we've purchased in collaboration with the HCP. And there are two specific actions that we're requesting the board to authorize today. One is to enter into a lease revenue allocation agreement with the Conservancy, and the other is to transfer just over $1 million from the lease revenues for the establishment of the endowment. And as General Manager mentioned, that $1 million is the result of 10 years of collecting lease revenues on the properties. So just a quick overview. I know the board is familiar, but just a reminder that the HCP is a permit that's under the Federal and State Endangered Species Act. It allows for regional planning for conservation, so that there's a regional plan for where the areas that are most appropriate for development and those that are most appropriate for conservation. Obviously, developers pay fees in exchange for streamlined permitting and mitigation. We have purchased nearly 14,000 acres to date since we began about 10 years ago, purchasing properties in collaboration with the HCP, the Conservancy. And the plan does allow for passive recreation. Because this is preserved land and it's mitigation land for development, there are rigorous management standards for species protection, similarly to what you would see on a conservation easement area. The Park District does manage nearly all of the lands that the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy has acquired to date. As General Manager mentioned, part of the HCP plan is a requirement for funding for long-term costs. So similar to permits that we're used to from resource agencies, an endowment is required to be established to fund the long-term costs for protection of the species. And as part of that, the plan also requires resource agency approved preserve management plans. You may be familiar with these. They're typically called long-term management plans when you have a resource agency permit. But in this case, they're called preserve management plan, and that dictates all of the tasks that need to be done to meet the permit requirements. Okay, and also as the General Manager mentioned, the cost sharing agreement with the Conservancy, the partnership is built on the idea that the Conservancy will provide all of the funding to meet the permit requirements. So those are the tasks that are required to manage the lands for the benefit of the species and protect the habitat. And then to the extent there is recreation on these lands, when public access, that will be the responsibility of the Park District. So of the 37 properties that we have purchased with the Habitat Conservancy, 11 of those properties do have leases, and these are leases that existed prior to the district's acquisition. So we inherited these leases. They do generate currently about $500,000 a year, as you can see here. The largest of those is wind leases. We also have telecom leases and some residential leases. So looking past over the last 10 years, the district has been collecting funds from the leases. Those leases have generated a total of $5 million, about $500,000 a year for 10 years. And nearly 60% of those lease revenues have been spent on the district's operation and management of those properties. As the General Manager mentioned, that has covered significant staff costs for the district. And in the fund right now, the current balance is $2.16 million. The agreement terms for the lease revenue agreement are consistent with previous agreements. So previously there were 37 different agreements. Each property that we purchased had its own agreement, and that agreement dictated how the lease revenues were to be used. So rather than having a bunch of individual agreements that we needed to look to, we're now creating one streamlined agreement that makes it easier to manage. And so consistent with those previous agreements, the new agreement will have these 3 buckets that the lease revenues can be used for. The first and the biggest one is current operation and management, and then the endowment funding, which we are talking about today. And then also some funding is set aside for future acquisitions to add to the preserved system. And this is just a little visual of all the agreements. It is quite complicated. And so we have the original HCP plan, the implementing agreement, the funding agreements. As I mentioned, there were 37 of those. And now we come to the lease revenue allocation agreement. This is the percentage breakdown. Each of the 11 properties does not have the same breakdown. So each purchase agreement was individual to each property, and they all have slightly different percentages of what goes into the 3 buckets. And we're carrying those percentages through into the new agreement. So the allocation of the existing 2.16 million, and that is as of the end of the second quarter, as of June 30th, will look like this: the 1.1 million for the endowment, land acquisition, a little over $500,000, and then there'll be over $500,000 left for current management. Just a little more detail about the endowment. As the general manager mentioned, the Conservancy did select the Regional Parks Foundation to be the holder of that endowment. They did do that through a competitive process. They put out an RFP and selected the Parks Foundation. The interest on the endowment can be spent beginning in the year 2037. And I also wanted to mention that at that time, at 2037, the district will have a choice whether to take on the responsibility for managing the property in accordance with the permit terms. So the plan is that the endowment will have be sufficient funding to pay the district to do the habitat management. If for some reason the endowment does not pan out as expected, the developer fees don't come through, the market turns, the endowment is not anywhere close to the 80 million that is planned for, the district at that point will have a choice whether to take on that responsibility or not. If we think there's insufficient funding, we can say no, and then it will fall back to the Conservancy. It will be their responsibility under the permit to find a different land manager. This is the approval schedule to get these particular actions done. We did go to the Finance Committee last week. The Park District's Finance Committee did recommend approval of these 2 actions, approving the lease revenue agreement and transferring the 1.1 million of the lease revenues to the Conservancy to help seed that endowment. We're here today before the board to approve those same 2 actions. If the board does approve those actions today, then Abby Bateman and the Conservancy will take those actions to the Conservancy's board on October 16th. Plus, you'll see they have an additional action that the Conservancy needs to take, which is to improve the endowment agreement between the Conservancy and the Regional Parks Foundation. As we get closer to spending the endowment agreement, we would have an additional agreement between the Park District and the Parks Foundation about the use of those endowment funds. That's down the road. And the Regional Parks Foundation, as I have a note here, has already approved that endowment agreement. So once the Conservancy approves it, we'll be ready to transfer funds and get that money invested and start growing. And I did just want to say a word about some of the next steps that you'll be seeing come over the next year and many years. This is sort of the cascading of how we get to public access. So we had the Habitat Conservation Plan in 2007, the implementing agreement in 2010. We are currently working on those preserve management plans. We do anticipate bringing those to the board next year in 2021. Those are required to be approved by the resource agencies, and we've been in negotiations for many months talking about trails and ponds and public access and habitat conservation, negotiating those preserve management plans. As part of that, we're developing a property analysis report, which is just a fancy word for the big spreadsheet that has all the line items for what's required to take care of the properties. And then we will be going through those line items and negotiating with the Conservancy about who pays, which agency pays for what. And so we are in the midst of those negotiations now. And on the right, you see a list of the tasks that are just some of the categories that go into managing these properties for habitat and for recreation. So again, we have these two items that we're recommending to the board today. And with that, I am happy to take any questions. And I do want to thank Naomi Laval from our planning staff, Philip Coffin from Land, and Deb Spalding and Deb Ocker from Finance. They've been a terrific team in dealing with these complicated agreements. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I see Director Coffey with his hand up.
Thank you. Christina, a question occurred to me since the Finance Committee presentation, which was also a very good presentation. The lease allocation agreement that you're asking us to approve addresses the allocation of these revenues, telecom, wind turbine, cattle, from specific properties, correct? The properties that to date have been purchased in partnership with the Conservancy. And there are specific percentage allocations from each of these properties' revenues. Does the allocation agreement address what hopefully will be the successful acquisition in partnership with the Conservancy over the next 10 years, thousands upon thousands of acres of new land that will contribute to these funds benefiting from various revenue produced by those lands? Or will that need future allocation agreements, such that this allocation agreement is only addressing the current lands that we own?
Thank you, Director Coffey. A very good question. The lease allocation agreement defaults to an average, sort of the average percentage. And so the average percentage overall might be about 22% of the properties we currently have, and that would be applied going forward, unless for some reason the parties want to renegotiate that. So we would stick with the percentages that we have for the current agreements, and that would be memorialized probably in a purchase and sale agreement for each property. But this sets a baseline that if you take all the properties that we have and you kind of take the average 22% for endowment, or for the endowment, about 20-something% for the acquisitions, up to a cap of 2 million, by the way, that is capped. And then for the current management, we would apply that going forward.
All right, so this is an agreement carrying forward with new acquisitions. And
Correct.
These percentage allocations are being fixed at this time, so we'd have to come up with very good reasons in the future to adjust them.
That's correct, and with the idea that we don't have to go through this every time, that we, have it established, and it would be more simple going forward.
Got it. Thank you.
Director Lane.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments and a question. One is I think we're all looking forward to finally having preserve management plans. And I do want to say how pleased I am that the management of these endowment funds is being done by the Regional Park Foundation. I think that was a really good choice and a very logical thing. Then my question has to do with accesses. When we first began our agreement to acquire and to manage these lands, a limited number of staging areas and accesses were set up as a number. And at that point, we didn't know how much acreage we would go into the HCP, and now we find we have thousands of acres. So I'm wondering where we are in terms of being more flexible with the accesses to reflect the larger number of acreage that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lane. We are still in the process of negotiating that. We have made progress in that the definitions are more flexible than they were. So rather than just public access, we have different defined access points. So we have a full-fledged staging area versus an access point, and then just pedestrian access point. And so I think 10 cars or less, I believe, is one definition, and then no formal parking is another definition. Those definitions have allowed us to expand beyond just the original 4 parking areas that were allowed. And so we've started that process. That has been good progress. But at this point, we have more negotiating to go with the Conservancy. We're focused on trying to get one preserve management plan done so that we can have one area open, and then those will be ongoing negotiations. Staff is very aware that we have purchased a lot of acreage very quickly, and that needs to be re-looked at.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Jam.
Yes, I really think that's a very important issue that has been raised. The issue from your staff's perspective is it's not the Conservancy that is the challenge. It is the wildlife agencies. Their focus is 100% on the endangered species, and there are laws that say they have to protect these endangered species. So you're always coming with a point of view, a philosophy, and the law that says everything else is secondary to protecting those species. And so that's their operating direction. So I think the realization that adaptive management was a part of the HCPs, that we have been so successful working in partnership with Abby and John Kopchak and the entire HCP, the Conservancy, excuse me, old school. And I think that needs to be recognized. And I think that may take some effort at a higher level at the agencies to really compel them to recognize that we have spent millions and millions of dollars of Park District WW money that is taxpayer money, not habitat money, in partnership, and they need to address adaptive management because of the success of how much land we've added. And I just think that you're dealing with very good scientists and biologists, but they don't have the optics of the taxpayer side of who's paying for a lot of the land. Not just them, not just the Conservancy, but the agency managing that land. And that will continue to be a challenge. But I think it's something that we just have to focus on, not get distracted and work collaboratively. But I wanted to acknowledge that the Conservancy has been very supportive of that recreational commitment, but there are hurdles with the agencies themselves. And I just have to say, after decades of working with those agencies, they don't always agree with each other. So it's just another challenge that one thinks a higher level of protection is for this and a higher level of protection is for that. We got in early on, 8 inches of the grass, get out there and measure it with a ruler. We need to be able to adapt to the reality of what's really happening out there. We need to adapt to the reality of fire. I would say that in the future, we may have to go back on some of these habitat issues and say, we need to burn more for safety. Is that a part of what's approved yet? No. So there's a lot more work to do, but I think the funding measure is a very good start as we continue to preserve such beautiful land. And finally, remember, board, we do not get the tax base in East Contra Costa County to operate our parks that we get everywhere else. So this help from the Conservancy to have this open space preserved, to have trails and public access is really important. And I really want to compliment and acknowledge that partnership, because had we not had that partnership, yes, we've added a lot more burden of managing the land, but we did not have the money to be able to manage this land on our own for the amount we've acquired. So I think that's really important, that we do not get the tax base that we get in the rest of the district. In Eastern Contra Costa County, majority of the HCP area. So thank you.
Thank you. I think AGM Kelchner looked like she wanted to say something.
Thank you, Director Corbett. I just wanted to add that the East Contra Costa County HCP is unique. There are HCPs across the state. However, to my knowledge, this is the only one that has a park district as a partner. And that means that the resource agencies are not used to having to deal with public access as part of these conservation areas. The resource agencies also are not used to having park staff and patrol and police to enforce these issues. And so I have been to meetings with other HCPs, and they have taken me aside and said, how do you get a police force to monitor and patrol and manage? Because they deal with issues like ATVs driving on the property, mattresses being dumped, all of the issues that we see on land that is not actively managed. So the Eastern Contra Costa County HCP is widely touted as the most successful HCP in the state. And that is in large part because of the Park District's partnership. And so with that comes the recreational component, as the general manager said, with the taxpayer dollars for that. So we are reminding the agencies of that, and there'll be more conversations to come with them.
Director Lane.
Just one more thing. When we had this agreement, which is I think over 10 years ago, at that point, the regulatory agencies stepped right up and they said, and we understand that there will be a need for public access in these properties. So I would suggest we don't lose track of those things that they said when we initiated this, because they were long fought. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I have a couple of things. One, thank you very much. A great presentation. We did see this just last week to Executive Committee, so appreciate all that information. Also, most importantly, appreciate this partnership that we have with one of our external partners. So important to our mission, and really allows us to bring our mission to more and more people. So it's really a great partnership that we have here. My comments, or they may be questions, we'll see how it comes out, are more concerned with the long term, the longevity, the sustainability of the entire plan. Will we be taking a look, will we be doing some projections on lease revenues into the future? As we know, some of these types of leases in other areas, sometimes they change, they end, regulatory things happen, windmills are outlawed, those sorts of things. So are we gonna be looking ahead at some of those issues to the sustainability of the lease revenue and supporting these plans? And also, I'm particularly interested, of course, in supporting the stewardship of the lands, which is, of course, a very important part to the HCP. Yeah, Mr. Jam has his hand up.
Yeah, President Corbett, I would actually, if Abby can come on, I think that's a good question for Abby. She really is the genius behind the little engine that could out there with the HCP and the Habitat Conservancy. So I think she knows it word by word on what those projections might be and what they're obligated to do. So if she can, I would request we invite her to speak. to that?
General Manager, unfortunately, Abby was not able to stay. She did have another meeting she had to go to. So
Okay, well, that was a really good attempt.
we did talk about this, so I'm happy to speak to it if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Sure. The Conservancy is required to do a full audit of their fee schedule every 5 years to ensure that the costs for managing the lands will be covered by the fees, that those fees are adequate. And so they do a big fee audit every 5 years. The fees are increased every year to keep up with inflation. And so they have a firm on board that we are now working with as well to really do a deep dive on all of those fees. And so they're looking at it. We are now doing our peer review of Abby's costs that she has put together for this. And so we're looking at it very closely. Our staff is also looking carefully at the lease revenues to do some projections about different scenarios, about depending whether the leases are renewed or whether they go away. I will mention that the lease revenues, it was never the plan that the lease revenues would cover this much of the current management costs. Those were kind of bonuses when we purchased the lands. And so the developer fees are structured so that they will be adequate to pay for those costs. And there are a lot of requirements to prove to the agencies, because this is a regulatory agency permit. The resource agencies require Abby to do audits, to do reporting, and to show the agencies that that financing is there.
And I have 2 more questions. Thank you for that. I'm looking forward to doing the projections to make sure those revenue sources will be continuing. The interest, is it restricted in any way? The interest, the use of the interest? I'm assuming it's probably restricted to those lands.
That is correct. It would be restricted to managing those lands.
Okay. And then do we know, will the Conservancy go on forever or does it sunset?
An excellent question, Director Corbett. The agency, the Conservancy, will sunset in 2037. And at that time, the Conservancy will go away and the Park District would take over management of the endowment of the lands, the use of the endowment funds, the permit requirements. We would become we would take over the Conservancy's role in ensuring the compliance with the permit requirements for those lands, using the funding from the endowment. As I mentioned, if at 2037, the Park District determines that the funding is not enough, or that we don't, for whatever reason, want to take on that role, then we have a choice. And the Conservancy at that point would be required to find a different partner to take on that responsibility.
I'm sorry, who would be looking for?
The Conservancy. So the Conservancy has a requirement and obligation to have that partner in place before 2037, before they
at the
dissolve.
time they set. Okay. I think that this is really, a wonderful partnership, as I've already stated. My concern would just be going into the future that, we continue to be vigilant about the sustainability of these revenues and how they support these lands, and maybe even have a broader picture as to how what happens in these lands may impact, the overall mission of the entire district. Right now, this is fabulous. We're creating an endowment, we have leases, we have money to take care of all of the stewardship, but I'm just concerned into the future, if there is some failure, we should be planning to make sure it doesn't, sort of be a drag on some other part of the overall mission of the district. So I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but, it looks great now. But, I just want to look as far into the future as we can, just to make sure, we're balancing our needs as we go forward.
Absolutely, Director Corbett. We will certainly be doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And Director Lane.
I appreciate all those questions. And I do want to say that when those leases for the wind turbines come up, that will be a discussion on the board as to whether we want to continue them. And as you know, there are pros and cons to having these huge wind tunnels set up there. So that's something we get to talk about in the future.
Yeah, and if technologies change or there's environmental regulation that impacts their continued operation, all those things will impact whether we have revenue or not. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, Mr. GM.
I'm sorry, but just a reminder for the board, this agency has been the pioneer in getting over $1.5 million in research on bird kills and turbine design. I really want to really recognize Dr. Doug Bell for the work he has done on studying wind turbines, which has actually led to the requirement of repowering with the larger, taller, slower moving turbines, more distant. They're social distancing the turbines. And I think that is something we should be extremely proud of. We have had strong support from the Audubon Society, including money from Audubon to do that. So it's just another example of the district's leadership on good science. But what is being brought up there about that by Director Lane is absolutely true. They have been controversial, but I think we've really come a long way. I think I don't want to misquote Doug, but I think there's been a 60% reduction in bird kills with the scientific work that we have done with the other biologists out there to re-site and repower. So the first thing we want is to get rid of all those old turbines that are close together, move too fast, and that is slowly happening on private property. But all of the turbines on our property are the more modern turbines, and we will continue to probably change them out to even better site locations. So that research is being funded, not at our cost, but through grants and funding in mitigation. So it's really, I think, really worth referencing today.
Yes, and future environmentalists may have future opinions about how the technology should change, just like what happened in the Altamont. So yeah, we definitely thank Mr. Bell for all his great work on that. So any other questions on this HCP issue? Okay, seeing none. This is a resolution to enter into the lease revenue allocation agreement. Would someone like to make that motion? Director Coffey.
I'll move approval of the resolution authorizing entry into the lease revenue allocation agreement with the Conservancy and transfer the lease revenues to the endowment fund with our affiliated foundation as presented.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Lane. Please call the roll on this resolution.
Yes, Madam President. Director Wieskamp.
Aye.
Director Wasby. Director Rosario.
Aye.
Director Eccles.
Aye.
Director Corbett.
Aye.
Director Lane.
Aye.
I already called you. And Director Coffey.
Aye.
Aye. Did I get everybody? Director Wasby, did you respond?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
So it's a unanimous.
It's unanimous.
Okay, board members, it is 2:56. And we have three-ish more items. In addition, we have the board comments. Would you like to take a quick break or you want to power through?
Power through.
Anne's ready to power through. Anybody else have?
The weather's good. I'm feeling much better. Let's do it.
Okay, good. Power through. Okie dokie. All right. Thank you all very much. Let's go to the next item. Board and staff reports, actions taken by other jurisdictions affecting the Park District. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you very much, Madam President. You have one item which is on the Contra Costa County Transportation Authority. As you know, we also have a significant McCollum Coast Trail in eastern Contra Costa County, primarily running along the East Bay Municipal Utility District right of way and then out into the Delta. And that trail is recognized as a statewide trail. But when they built the new Highway 4 bypass, there was not an accommodation of how people get over that brand new highway. This is a major, it was a condition originally when they built that, but then there was an agreement with the property owners to acquire it, the right of way to build the bridge. So now that has been put in place, and we're very pleased that there will be an overcrossing of that Highway 4 bypass in a very important area of high population and connection to the trails. So we're very happy about that. If you have any details, questions, I think Sean Dugan might be available to answer those if you have some.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes, Director Lane?
I'm just wondering if East Bay Mud has been totally cooperative in supporting this.
General Manager, I do not see Sean Dugan still in the call, in the meeting.
That's fine. On this question, it's pretty straightforward. The sections of the trail on the Water District are already built. This is getting across the highway right of way and then connecting back in. It connects to other pieces as well, but it's not 100% on the aqueduct, but it is that those sections go all the way from East County into Antioch. And so, yes, the answer is yes, they have been cooperative.
This is Contra Costa, not Mud, not East Bay Mud.
Right.
No, this is actually the East Bay Mud McCollum right of way that actually goes out into the Delta by Ordway track.
Yes.
It's their big pipe coming out of the Sierras.
Oh, this is the pipe, not the canal.
Underground pipe, not the canal.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Did I see any other hands up on that one? Okay, nope. Okay, thank you very much, Bob. And next item is also General Manager's comments. We will be having a presentation by Government Affairs from Chief Eric Fuller and Lisa Baldinger, who is the Legislative and Policy Management Analyst. And Mr. GM, I know you will introduce that.
Thank you very much. When we started working, as the board's very familiar, we do annual polling and surveying to find out how we're doing. We ask the public who pays for the park district, how are we doing? What are the issues? And this year, because of COVID, we wanted to drill deeper as to the significance and value of having our parks open when so many places were closed. And so I want to thank the Legislative Affairs Department for working on a lot of new information. I think it's fantastic information. It's a deep drill on that information. And I think you'll be pleased and maybe even challenged with some of the findings. And I think some of you have already seen this through the Ledge Committee, but I think it's pretty important information for the future of the district. So Eric.
Thank you, General Manager. Eric Fuller, Government Affairs and Legislative Manager, and being joined by my colleague Lisa Baldinger today. Just wanted to thank the district and the General Manager for supporting this type of work. It's very important to have real data when looking at advocacy, whether that be in Sacramento or in DC or locally. So this is very important information for us to have as a unit of the Park District and Government Affairs, but I think it's also very important for messaging and for public affairs and also for communication with the community through planning. So really appreciate the value the district places on this kind of work. Wanted to start by just also acknowledging the Legislative Committee and Dennis making this recommendation, Director Waspy making this recommendation to bring the presentation to the full board. So with that, I think we can put the first screen on. And I want to hand this over to our legislative analyst, Baldinger, who and created this project PowerPoint. This is an extension of an actual survey that we did last year that Lisa was also the project manager for. And it was always intended to have a follow-up scientific survey. It was not intended to include questions about COVID-19, but this now actually does both. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Lisa.
Good afternoon, President Corbett, members of the board. I first want to confirm that everyone can see the presentation.
Fine.
Excellent. Okay, so going in, as Eric shared, what we'll be presenting is both an extension of a 2019 project, as well as a deep dive into some COVID-19 related questions. So I'm going to take us back first to 2019 and really want to thank ASD and grants for their contribution to our instrument that was utilized in 2019. And then of course, our operations department and public affairs who helped get the word out. In 2019, we conducted one of the most broad spreading surveys in recent history of the Park District. But as the GM said, we have a long history of surveys. Our first survey was conducted in 1976 by Richard Trudeau. And so this is a continuation of that. However, a lot has changed since 1976. We have social media, we have the internet, we have an expanding community. And so this survey was pushed out over a variety of mediums through social media. It was conducted in 4 languages. It was shared across the district and we received a lot of wonderful engagement. And as many of you are well aware, we got over 8,000 responses. Because it was such a broad spread survey and the way in which we conducted it wasn't a scientific survey. And so we had the intention to always confirm the results through a scientific instrument. And then going into 2020, when we began discussions for this in February, March, we recognized the need to fold in some COVID-19 related questions due to the newly arise circumstances that we were in. So we conducted a variety of interviews with different consultants. As you'll see in future slides, because of the broad push of the 2019 survey, we were able to analyze what mediums we received significant input over. And one of the mediums was cell phones. And so because of that, it was important to us that the consultant we partnered with for this project had cell phone embedded into their scientific methodology for surveying the public. And so we worked with Lake Research Partners, which is a national firm. They'll be speaking at the end of this presentation to give some insights on the study. We conducted a 500 East Bay adult survey. It was phone to text in English and Spanish with the goal of scientifically building off of the 2019 survey and also to gain some insights onto how COVID-19 is impacting our public. So as I hinted at, in the 2019 survey, because it was over a variety of mediums, intercepted in the parks, cell phones, desktops, we wanted to integrate some of that methodology into our July 2020 survey. So those who were surveyed were either received an initial phone call or initial text, and they were able to opt into their preference for filling out the survey. If they received a phone call, they could opt to have a text or vice versa. And so as you can see, 72% chose to take the survey via text. Consistently in our surveys, we like to garner awareness of the Park District. This is based off of the name East Bay Regional Park District alone. And so in the July 2020 survey, you'll see there's a higher percent of somewhat aware, and we think that is because of the broader scope of who we were able to speak with. We will be sharing the demographics in full in this presentation. But overall, 92% aware based off name alone is incredibly strong. So we are pleased to see that continue in our survey. We asked about frequency of visiting our parks. Likely because of COVID, we're seeing an increase in weekly or more frequent usage in July of 2020. In the 2019 survey, the daily users does have a significant spike, and we think that's akin to our in-park survey engagement. So we got a lot of our regulars, but we were pleased to see about half were more than a week, and then half who were surveyed were a little bit more for the special occasions. We asked the top reason folks are visiting. This is based off of the 2019 survey. It's a list of about maybe I'd say about 15 different options that we put in based off of open-ended responses, as well as what we had put into the previous survey. So fresh air was a new response based off of open-ended questions in the 2019 survey that we were able to expand and further capture. We also have time with family and friends, relaxation, and physical exercise as the top results. If I put all 15, it would be too small to read, but I'm happy to share that in the future. We also asked about current park and trail usage. So what folks are getting onto out in the parks. Individuals were allowed to select 2 answers here. So you could select maybe you like to hike and you also like to bike, or you go on walks around one of our lakes, but you also attend social events in the parks. So the 2 top ones were hiking and walking. Walking is a new addition that we've added just based off of receiving feedback from the public that walking is just a separate category, how people associate. Additionally, dog walking, biking, social events, jogging and running, and picnicking all received about a comparative response from our public in the July survey. We asked about transportation to parks. In the 2019 survey, we had the option of regional trails slash walking slash biking all in one. We received about 50% of those who filled out the survey shared that was their usage. In the July 2020 survey, we broke apart those options and received about 60% in total when you combine it. So we were able to capture about 10% more who were either walking or biking on maybe city trails, county, etc. But personal vehicle and carpooling with friends and family remain the top access points for parks. Interestingly, in the crosstabs of this information, when we look at it geographically, the public transit does have an increase in northwestern Alameda, where our AC Transit partnership with bus lines to Tilden and other areas exists. So when it's there, people use it, so that's a benefit. Overall experience at East Bay Regional Park District continue to be incredibly positive. Very pleased to see 97% of those surveyed reported a positive experience, 0% poor. So excellent review of our services and a testament to our staff. This is a question that's very, we're excited to dive into more on future surveys. So we asked about barriers to visit. A new addition to this survey tool, and one that of course we do put up the safety precaution of to not go alone, but not wanting to go alone is a barrier. And so we are curious to dive in on a future survey. Is that not wanting to go alone because of social interest in having company, or is it a safety? Especially because when looking at the crosstabs on the response, it doubles for females and then has another significant increase for women of color. Additionally, lack of appropriate restrooms, personal safety, and not knowing how to access were some of the top results, with none being the well, it was the highest result, but of course, no barrier is not a barrier. Continuing on to future trail and park amenities. So looking out into the future, this question had the caveat of this is regardless of the pandemic. Eric, when presenting our COVID-related slides, will share facilities relative to the pandemic, and there is a priority shift by our public, understandably. Continuing the 2019 results, water bottle filling stations and additional restrooms are top results for the public across the board, likely due to sort of the cross services, regardless of what recreation or personal enjoyment you're having in the park, you can benefit from both of those amenities. Additional picnicking sites is a new addition to the July 2020 survey that received a significant amount of responses. We asked about how folks are learning about the East Bay Regional Park District, which is a testament to our website, which continues to be the top place folks are going. This survey also received a number of individuals who are hearing from family, friends, and colleagues. And interesting to us, another higher result and a new addition to the survey is other websites. So All Trails, REI's trail hiking website, and others, which is a great sort of a second party recommendation to use our parks. So with that, that concludes the continuation of the 2019 related questions. I'm now going to give a high overview of the demographics of who we spoke with in this survey. The demographics have sort of two very high benefits among many, and one is that We benefit from the crosstabs. So as I was speaking, I shared a little bit about some geographic differences or others. And then additionally, these are weighted to be aligned with our census, and our consultants from Lake Research Partners can share a bit more on that. So I'm just gonna put them on the screen for about 3 to 5 seconds so that you can go ahead and read relative to population size. We have the regional demographics. We also asked about identified gender and age. We have employment status and last year of schooling. We asked whether the individual being surveyed rents or owns. Do they have children living at home, and if so, how many? We asked how many years have they been living in the East Bay? And then lastly, we asked if they'd be willing to share their identified racial or ethnic group. And for those who were willing and responded Asian American or Pacific Islander, they received a secondary question, which you can see on the right side of your screen. So this concludes the Park and Public Interest Survey portion of this presentation. I'm now going to hand it off to Eric to continue on what was in the same survey itself on COVID-19.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, and the demographic information was very exciting for government affairs, given the very good tracking of the census in the East Bay. And we also were speaking with people who weren't just registered voters. This was an effort to see if we could communicate and listen to a wider array of our population and help us in the future in terms of the way we are interacting with them. So with that, as Lisa indicated, we definitely had to ask some COVID related questions in this survey. So we'll begin that slide now, please. So the first question is just how are parks being considered essential during COVID? And the response to that is pretty much off the charts. If Lisa can click over. We wanted to ask this question particularly because of advocacy in Washington and even in Sacramento of showing that we're providing a critical service at this time and that we should be eligible for COVID relief funding as it is impacting our bottom line. So an 81% said yes on it, on parks being essential. Next slide, please. Then we also wanted to ask how important it was to keep the parks open at this time. And we had a very high result of 92% that said it was important. And that is actually a little bit up from an earlier survey we did during the pandemic. But it really shows and demonstrates that we've been on the right side of history by keeping parks open. Next slide, please. And then we wanted to have a comparison between physical and psychological impacts. And these 4 slides that you'll see coming up are all ones that our Lake Research Partners found to be very, very high, and they were somewhat surprised having not seen polling numbers for the Park District before, but 96% agree that physical exercise parks have been important for physical exercise. That's not entirely a surprise. Next slide, please. But this slide was a little bit of a caution to me, at least, that 96% agree that the parks have been important for their mental health at this time. And this tracks an earlier survey we did that also showed that about the same amount of people said that parks were having a big impact on helping folks stay stress-free or less stressed. And of those 96%, in the previous survey, about 74% said that they felt that they would have lasting psychological and mental impacts moving forward. So that's something with all of our healthy parks, healthy people work that we really will need to dive deeper into the future. Next slide, please. And then, not a surprise, but we took this survey in July when nobody was doing distance learning. So 94% of the public said that it was very important to have parks open for children to stay physically active outdoors. Next slide, please. And then we also asked the question about the local economy and just get a sense of if people understood the impact that the Park District played in keeping projects moving forward. And we've got a 90% agree on that, which is a very strong number. We were pleased to see. Next slide, please. And then Lisa alluded to this slide being different in terms of amenities, and significantly and not surprisingly, hand washing stations have now jumped up to one amenity that would be interested in seeing more of, restrooms, etc. But then the water bottle filling stations is significantly lower. And I think that that's a testament probably to our public affairs department and all the other messaging that we've been doing about bringing your own water, keeping it full, because the places to get water in the parks had been turned off. So now I think that messaging has gotten through. And next slide, please. And then here's one that is just a testament to our employees and their commitment to keeping parks open and the great work that they're doing in the field to keep people safe in the parks. The public understands it and believes that the park staff are super important, 99%. As our colleague Yuli Padmore, who provided support for this project, has also pointed out, we want to know who that 1% is that doesn't want clean restrooms and doesn't want us to manage for wildfire. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we asked about youth jobs and youth employment. And both this survey and the survey we did in May, a really, really high number of folks supporting employment opportunities for young people in the parks, 89%. I think the general manager referred to additional crews earlier in the meeting. This is something that we think people are very supportive of, and we're very interested in exploring this more in terms of how we could make that happen in the future. I do believe that if the federal administration changes, that there will be a renewed effort to provide core funding in terms of the Civilian Conservation Corps or some other mechanism, AmeriCorps or some other mechanism throughout the country. And that concludes the presentation. As Lisa indicated, we do have our consultants joining us, David Merriman and Jacqueline Jitten. And Lake Research Partners is, as Lisa said, a national firm. Celinda Lake, who is their founder, was actually on the first Clinton campaign, Bill Clinton campaign, as one of the key pollsters for that successful effort. So for advocacy purposes and our work, it's very helpful to be able to talk to people in Washington and other parts of the country and say that this data comes from a nationally known firm. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions of Lisa and I, but we do have David here. So I know we're maybe a little bit crunched for time, but if there's any questions for him or any insights that you would like to hear from him, he is available.
Well, thank you very much, Eric and Lisa, and excellent choice of polling firm, I must say, from my own personal experience. Let me just ask if there's any questions for David. David, would you like to say a few words?
It was all very clearly relayed by Lisa and Eric. It was a pleasure to work with them. And let me thank Jacqueline, who's on the phone, was the lead analyst on this research. And also noting that while we are a national firm, I live here in Berkeley and I'm a regular Ace Bay Park user. So it's exciting to do this work with our local residents.
Nice. So are you in the 80% and 90%?
Oh, well, we didn't poll me. We definitely don't poll the pollsters, but we polled some of our neighbors and they seem to really, really, really like their East Bay Parks.
Good to know. Director Lane. Uh-oh, you're muted. Uh-oh. Are you still there, Beverly?
Well, it's good to know that you live near here and you're familiar with them. And my question was there anything that appeared that you found truly astonishing?
Well, I did, and Eric, I think mentioned this, or Lisa did, that we did find astonishing those 96%, 95% numbers for things like the agreement that, keeping the parks open is important for mental health and physical health. Particularly since, and you saw this, there were some real differences from earlier surveys, because unlike the surveys of actual park users, this was a survey of literally all adults in the East Bay, everyone who lives in Alameda and Contra Costa County, scientifically representative survey. And while most of them are park users, over 2/3 of them are using the parks at least monthly, you have plenty of people who are not, right? They're doing it, they have other activities in their lives. That's not what they do. But nonetheless, I was struck by, even among that, roughly 30% who don't use the parks that often, they overwhelmingly and quite intensely support, keeping the parks open, agree that it's an essential service, and believe that it's important for both physical and mental health. And I was struck and a little surprised by that, the strength of those numbers relative to when already there's obviously a very large number using the parks, but above and beyond that, to have such a high number supportive of and recognizing the importance of the parks, even if they themselves are not using them, was notable and I would say somewhat surprising.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Eccles, and then Director Rosario.
Thank you, David. That's very, very helpful. And thank you, Lisa and Eric, for presenting. So you already addressed part of my question, which was what was the drop off when you looked at, in terms of people who use the parks a lot versus people who rarely use the parks? How much did it drop off in terms of those questions, like, believing that the park was an essential service, believing that it's important for physical health and mental health and those other issues?
Sure. It varies a bit by question. There's no single answer to that, but I would say, I'm going to look at my crosstabs here. So give me just a second to make sure I'm reporting this accurately. But here we go. Users. Yeah, that those who use the parks the most often are the most supportive, but it's over on those questions, things like agreeing that it's important to keep them open, on that it's important for mental health, that it's important for the staff to keep working in the parks during COVID. It's over 90%, regardless, any way you slice it, right? There's no subgroup of residents that disagrees at any substantial number with any of those questions. So yeah, there's a few points variation here and there. It does appear, the most frequent park users are by a tiny bit even more enthusiastic, but really there's almost no variation because almost everyone agrees.
Yeah, that's fantastic news. Thank you. And just my other question was, so how did you determine this particular sample in terms of?
Sure, this is a random, so we took the most complete available databases of residents of the two counties of Alameda and Contra Costa counties, and did extra phone matching to add any additional, particularly cell phones, but also any landlines that weren't already matched to the database. So we had the most complete and up-to-date set. And then we, as indicated at the beginning of the presentation, we then reached out to people through live calls with professional interviewers, but also the option to take the survey online on their smartphone or other portable device if they preferred. And the majority actually did complete it through text. It was outreach through text, but then they got an online form to complete the survey. And then we also stratified the sample to make sure it was geographically representative and demographically representative of the population. So because we know, certain groups of people are easier to reach than others by phone, so we make extra attempts on younger people and lower income people and people of color who are traditionally harder to reach. So we made sure that those were included proportionally within this survey. And then once the data came back, we also weighted it slightly, not a lot because it was already quite representative, but we did a little bit of demographic weighting to match the actual census data for the two counties. So that the survey is as representative as it could be of that entire population. And of course, it does include a lot of people who use the parks, and as noted at the beginning of the presentation, most people are using the parks at least monthly, and a substantial proportion are using them weekly or more often, but also including a subset of residents who, for one reason or another, are not using the parks, and all of them were included.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, Director Rosario, and then Director Coffey.
Yeah, this is a great presentation. Thank you. My question is around ethnicities. What's the percentage of people agreed to disclose their ethnic?
Yeah, you'll see in the results of that question on the demographics that we did have a number of people who refused the question. That's always the case. They don't like to answer that question, or they just don't think it's anyone's business. So we account for that, and we then proportionately, we assume that those are a mix of different ethnicities as everyone else's. But in this case, it was only 4% who actually refused the question. So 96% gave some answer, although 2% of those also said other, none of the categories that we offered. So, but 94% chose one or more of the categories. We allowed people to offer multiple responses. So they could say they were, both Latino and African American, or whatever their combination was. And then you see that broken down in the slides where 1/4 of our sample was Asian American or Pacific Islander, 25%, we had 20% Latino, and it was helpful in getting our Latino sample in that we offered the survey in both English and Spanish. And then we had 11% African American and 39% white, and none of those other categories, and a handful of Native American, Middle Eastern as well.
And then a follow-up question for maybe Lisa. How do the demographics here compare when we compare to people using our programs?
That is a great question that I'm going to have to follow up for you, Dee, or Director Rosario.
Yeah, I actually have an outstanding request on that anyway, but that'd be great. Thank you.
If I could, just to throw in an observation on that, we did see, you saw the question about barriers to accessing the parks, and we did see a little bit higher proportion of women, as Lisa noted, saying that there were certain barriers, in particular not wanting to go alone, and we also saw somewhat higher among people of color, particularly women of color, on those questions. There's probably some variation there in the actual usage of the parks as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Director Coffey.
Thank you, Eric. The lake research was conducted in 2020, and that was the scientific study as we're referring to it. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the 2019 community survey was basically an online survey that the district conducted itself.
Correct, and actually probably a better question for Lisa, but yes, it was online, and we promoted it in the parks and in social media and with additional media, but it was driving traffic to answer a survey, but it wasn't scientifically based.
Yeah, I remember working on it a little on my own on Facebook. So here's the thing. I want your takeaway from an attitude or approach to unscientific surveys that I grew up with, hanging around political consultant types. You knew many of them. Ellen knows them all personally, but they were all preaching, don't pay any attention to unscientific surveys. They're not worthwhile. They tend to attract people with particular intense interests in certain subjects. And while it's all well and good to conduct them for community relations purposes, their actual results are suspect, or at least not as worthy of taking credibly as with the scientific surveys that we pay a lot of money for, right? So I notice here that our community survey, the results to where we have parallel questions, the same questions, right? They seem to track awfully well. And the demographics of the online survey seem to track pretty well with reality. And so is there a takeaway from this that the way we conduct these online surveys with many responses in a not a scientific fashion are actually pretty reliable?
You're going to
I'm happy to
answer
answer
that question.
I would say it's very helpful from the standpoint of understanding and getting feedback from the community. And so while the scientific survey is it does track the public opinion survey, you know, we're not going to afford a scientific survey of 8,000 participants. So having it available for that many people to respond to, and then to see it track fairly well with David's work, I think is really what we wanted to find out. And as Lisa indicated, we also wanted to try to figure out what mediums, based on the community survey that we did in 2019, we recognized that the medium to communicate with people was more through cell phone and digital. And so, you know, David alluded to it, but they had a question that says, are you in a safe place to talk, or do you want us to text? So that's, for us, that was a really great tool to have, because I think it's a better sample of the broader community.
And if I may, Eric, based off of the input that we received for the community survey in 2019, it was so wonderful that we were able to receive 8,000 responses. We had it open over 3 months, and it's a testament to our staff and all that contributed to pushing that survey out. Mona Ko, our operations team. We had an intern, Daisy, who helped significantly to do interception surveys in the park. So it was a big lift to be able to get that 8,000. And we did receive some specific interest groups where we received sort of copy and paste input. And we could see that in the basic out of the 8,000. And so we were aware of these sort of impacts that can happen when it is a non-scientific survey. And for that reason is why we always had the plan to confirm the results scientifically. And just to get that 8,000 was a big lift by staff, and many, many thanks to all who contributed.
All right, well, for me, it means a lot that it tracks the scientific survey, because in the absence of that, given my upbringing, I would have downplayed in my own mind the significance of the community survey. I would have listened to it and understood, but I wouldn't have taken it as much gospel as it appears to truly be in terms of its tracking with the scientific poll. And just on one more, and I'll let it go. The question from Director Lane about astonishment. I was truly astonished by the survey results. I believe it was the online survey, Eric or Lisa, or the scientific survey that tested the district's name identification?
That was this July 2020 scientific survey.
So good. So the scientific survey, what astonished me was the extraordinarily high name recognition of East Bay Regional Park District. It's astonishing to me because when I started doing tabling for the district back in 2005, when the ambassador program started up, it was my observation, 15 years ago, that the park district's name ID was fairly low, that people were familiar with the parks. Everyone knew Tilden Park, everyone knew the well-known parks, but it was my impression very few people actually connected the name East Bay Regional Park District. They weren't sure whether these parks were part of a state park system or a county park system. People understood they existed and really enjoyed them and thought highly of them, but they weren't sure it was East Bay Regional Parks. And to this day, I spend a good deal of my time doing ambassador gigs, telling people about this special California district devoted to Park and Rec in 2 counties with an elected board and such. But what this survey tells me is that that concern maybe isn't as real as it was, at least for me 15 years ago from doing tabling. And that's a remarkable testament perhaps to the community relations effort over the last 15 years that maybe GM can comment on, and maybe he agrees with me that that's an astonishing change in not just recognition of our parks, but recognition of this legal entity that is the political subdivision of the state, which is truly remarkable and a very good thing.
Colin, thank you very much. I too recall that poll. And one of the things that really concerned me at the time that was an eye-opener was Del Val. And some of the people said, oh, it's a Livermore Park. Some people said it's Lake State, it's a state park. Had no recognition of that that's one of our busiest, costliest parks to manage. And I think really the gold star goes to our public affairs department for branding. I've been concerned, and even back with Pat O'Brien, that we kept marketing. Now McLaughlin East Shore, it says state park. They don't do a thing there. And so we actually had an arm wrestling with the state park system, put our name on the beautiful entrance on University. It says operated by the East Bay Regional Park District, because everything at that time had to be approved by the state, and they put their name on it, not ours. So I really think that's a really good indication of why polling's important, because it says you need to pivot and spend more time over here. The exact same thing has happened with our foundation. Our foundation back then was not recognized that we even had a foundation. And today it polls very high in recognition. So I think those are some achievements that are really worth celebrating. And I really thank you for your questions, Colin, on that.
And I just wanted to add, Colin, that it's significant that a number of the people that were interviewed in the scientific survey indicated they do not use our parks at all, yet we still had a 92% recognition.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, Director Waspy.
Well, I just wanted to echo and thank Lisa and Eric and Yuli, especially the whole legislative and government affairs team. These are the guys that come up with these ideas. They're incredibly creative, incredibly resourceful, and I think these studies are very, very valuable. And David and Jacqueline, thank you so much for doing such a professional survey. You know, these things I think have incredible value for us in a number of ways. One thing, you know, to sustain and the fact that people are aware of us, 96% are aware of us and have a positive view of us. You know, we went out on a limb in March suggesting that we keep parks open, suggesting that they were essential even before most of the real big power people said that parks were essential. It was our core belief. And it seems like that's been sustained with these surveys. You know, and I think in the future, these surveys can be used for nothing but good for us. I mean, Eric had mentioned that COVID released funding from the state and federal agencies. And I think this will be a foundation to put the Park District in a good stead. I think, and you know, looking long range, I honestly think these surveys do nothing but encourage us as a board and staff, and kind of sustain our belief that potential, you know, parcel taxes and bond measures that we've always talked about and the need for. I think this creates an excellent foundation for our future, and I thank you guys for your, again, creativity and resourcefulness in doing these type of surveys.
Anyone else? Yes, Ann. Excuse me, Director Wieskamp.
Oh, that's okay. Government affairs, you make us look good. As a board member, I am always happy to say I'm on the East Bay Regional Park District Board, because I always feel people have a positive view, but it's nice to have that proven to us. And I think it's a great asset when you're going out looking at how can we solve some needs and wishes from some of those people. And I think that enables us to know we can go out, look for some money in various ways, and that we're going to have the support of the public. So good job all around. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to say something now. First of all, it is great to have this data, and I'm assuming you're going to share all the data, including the crosstabs, with the with board sometime soon. Yes,
I see a smile.
Fairly soon. Okay, great. So I too, it's wonderful to have data for advocacy. I think you often hear me comment, well, let's make sure we emphasize that when we go talk to somebody for support on some of the things that we're doing. So that is really great. I would ask, are we going to turn this around also in supporting programming and things we should do with regard to operations? I'm particularly interested in the data with regard to barriers and how we turn that around and combine that with programming we're already doing and maybe expand programming, especially making sure that, we have things that are important to all the communities that use our parks.
I'll just say that the intent of both surveys has always been to have cross-departmental application. And so that whether it's operations or public affairs or obviously government affairs, we can use the data for decision-making as well as advocacy. And so we have not gotten to all of our departments yet with the data, but we will be sharing it and assume that will help guide some decisions.
I was particularly interested in the data with regard to barriers to women and women of color who might not want to go to a park alone. I can tell you that's, I can share that experience. Usually I have my trusty dog with me if I'm going by myself, but it's always nice to have programming that is inclusive. So people who may be single, especially when COVID goes away, can have opportunities to share in the park. So I thought that was really interesting. I think it's something that we definitely should take a look at because that sort of jumped out. And I was just curious, is it possible to go back to the barrier slide just for a second? I don't remember if we asked that as a wide open question or we were prompting issues.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I know there's a lot of slides in there. So did we just say, what are your barriers? Or did we say, is one of the barriers not knowing how to access? I mean, were these wide open questions?
This was closed-ended. They were offered the categories. And then we had other as a catch.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
So we actually maybe asked the question, you didn't want to go alone.
It was well, it was a long list of things, and that was, so they picked it out of a fairly long list as the number one item. So it was not, it wasn't, we weren't pushing people to that response, but it was one of many options that they had.
Did we
Director Corbett, the question here was based off and expanded from the 2019 survey question, which did allow for an open-ended response. And then based off of the open-ended response that were most significant, we folded them into the actual survey question.
Okay. Did we ask about public transportation as a barrier?
Yes. David, do you have the crosstabs up while I'm sharing my screen?
Yeah, hold on just a minute. Let me pull that up.
Thank you.
Yeah. So transportation was one of the possible barriers that was mentioned. and it was offered as one of the options in the list. 6% of the respondents, and this was a list where they could give us up to 2 responses. So 6%, that was one of their top 2 barriers, and that was ranked 7th out of a list of 12 or 13 different possibilities. So it was in the mix, and it was a factor for some people, but clearly far below the issue of these other issues, such as restrooms, personal safety, no one can go alone, not knowing where they are, limited information. All of those were higher or more important barriers to more people than transportation was. Now, transportation is a general term, right? So it could refer to a lack of transit or some other issue, but that's where it came in the list.
It would be interesting to look at visitors who visit less often and how answers to barriers like public transit sort of flesh out. That'd be interesting to look at. And then another question, well, since we're looking at this barriers to visit, what does other tell us? And as you can see, it's twice as large as other.
Yeah, it tells us there's probably something we're missing from this list. And what we didn't do, unfortunately, is capture an open-ended response on that question. But now that we see how large other is, we would certainly do that next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that would be important.
Yeah.
And I especially, you can take the slide down now. I especially appreciate the fact of the scientific survey, because I don't think the unscientific survey gives us such strong data with regard to age and ethnicity. Is that correct? We don't have that data.
Well,
with that.
they have different purposes. I mean, it is not as fully representative of the whole population. It's a different population, but what's nice about the online survey is how many responses it has, right? So there's a lot of variety and texture in what people had to say, and things like these open-ended questions. You can gather a lot of information from that. So I certainly wouldn't dismiss it. I think it's probably a very valuable tool, but the advantage of this one is we know that, within plus or minus, 4.5% margin of error, that this is a representative of the whole population of the East Bay. So it has that greater accuracy in that way.
Yes, I do appreciate that. And I also, I guess I would just close in saying, the board has been speaking up about equity and ensuring our parks are welcoming places. And I think this data will help us in, developing our programming and our operations to reflect what we're asking. So thank you very much. I think that this was really good. And I look forward to seeing crosstabs. Any other questions or comments, anybody? I'm a nerd that way, so sorry.
Just wanted to say thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks, Bob, for the guidance and the strategic vision for it, and Lisa, you as well. And we'll get additional information to you, Director Corbett. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I bet you I'm not the only one who would like to see the crosstabs. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. All right. Mr. General Manager, do you have any closing comments on this item?
Not really. I would just say that the great benefit of the board being extremely interested in the public surveys, both scientific as well as in-park surveys, we have now a couple of decades longitudinal studies that we can track. And I think that for me, and looking at things like FF and WW, that has been extremely important to be able to track that. And I'll just say public safety and safety in the parks has always been a very high priority of the public, because they do know of parks. And the biggest story in history is when New York City lost Central Park. It was not a good place to go, and now it is. And so I think keeping the public safe in the parks is a really important priority for all the public. And we have that tracking to show that it's just being very consistent. So when I hear that people are concerned about safety, it tracks with consistency over time. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? All right. Again, thank you very much. That was very interesting. And our next item is announcements from closed session.
Board President Corbett, Carol Victor, District Council. There are no announcements from closed session at this time.
Thank you very much. Now we have.
Rosario has his hand up.
Oh, very sorry. Sorry, I didn't see you, Director Rosario. Uh-oh, you're muted. I can't hear you either.
Yes, he can't hear.
I just have a comment on under GM comments for operations. I noticed that our interpretive folks are doing their thing, and what I'd like to know or like to comment is that we need to be collecting data as far as which schools we're servicing and the demographics of that school. And these things are part of our financial goals for the Park District. And we need to start be cognizant of collecting that kind of data. And so I just wanted to know, number one is congratulate our interpretive staff for doing all these virtual programs. But at the same time, we really need to collect data so that we can continue, to show that we're serving the community that we're actually trying to reach. So that's it. So thank you.
Director Rosario, I'm not sure, but I don't know if Ann Kassenbaum is accessible, but we have been tracking the data. It's something we've been doing for a while, and it is very important to the interpretive program.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have just so you know, I have a outstanding request for the data for 2019 and whatever we have for 2020. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Rosario. So our next item, I know you've all been waiting to hear this one, board committee reports. So on executive committee, I don't have anything new to report beyond what you have available to you. And in fact, we took care of several of the executive committee items in today's meeting. So that was all good. So Director Waspy, Chair of Legislative, do you have anything you'd like to add to your report?
Nothing to add, except we're forging ahead, supporting legislation that supports the Park District and our communities.
That's a good matchup. Okay, now it is time for board comments. Who would like to go first? Dee, Director Rosario, would you like to go first?
Let's see, I just have to find my sheet, my little cheat sheet. I thought I just had it right there.
Too much paper.
Too much paper. Here we go.
Oh, Dee, while you're looking for that, I'm just going to bring something up that is important to all of us. So our first meeting in November is the first Tuesday of November, and that's November 3rd. That date might ring a bell with a few people. That is election day. It's it's a presidential year, so it's a very important day. And I think we may be one of the very few boards that meets during the day on election day, and other boards that meet in the evening on that day often postpone their meetings to make sure everybody has their opportunity to vote. So I just want to sort of take I guess a poll is a way to do it, Carol, and see, would any of you like to postpone the November 3rd meeting? It's okay, just go like this if you'd like to postpone the November 3rd meeting and not have it on election day. Do I see everybody okay with that?
With what?
Postponing the November 3rd meeting. We have a board meeting on election day. And so the issue was raised whether we should not have a meeting on election day and have it another day which we can discuss as well. So are board members okay with postponing the November 3rd meeting, the election day meeting, presidential election day
Well,
meeting?
I would like to talk about it a little bit. I didn't put my thumb up. I mean, we never have done that. And I always thought that the people who had it in the evening had their meetings in the evenings, tended to postpone it so they could go do that final poll watching and partying and the things that elected officials do on election day. I don't believe we've ever postponed it on election day. Does anybody know?
As far as I know, we haven't. Carol,
Yeah.
would you like to verify that?
Yes, I would. No, we have not postponed it. And what I'm suggesting, instead of having an extended discussion on it, that we go ahead and just put it on the agenda for discussion on the 16th. And then the board can discuss the pros and cons of rescheduling it, the meeting, and setting it on a different day.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So it'll come back to us at the next meeting. I do know some people are going to be out poll watching during the day and volunteering at the polling sites because there's a lack of people available to do that this year. So I'll just throw that in the mix as to an issue. So, all right, Dee, you ready?
Yes. Okay. Let's see, since the last board meeting, I had an interview with K-Top, which is Channel 10, and that'll be televised in November, sometime after the election. And then it was kind of fun, all fun stuff about the Park District. And then on 9/17, I attended the Operations Committee. And then on 9/21, I attended the World Peace event, which I thought was very, very, very well done, very uplifting. I think everybody that attended felt the same. It was just set the right tone, something we all needed to hear. And then on 9/8, let's see. On 9/18, I also attended the board workshop, which was great. 9/21, I attended the event for the retirement of Paul McCreary from HARD. Very nice event. And then on 9/21, I attended the Oakland DD Coalition. That's where I found out that the city of Oakland has a proposal for getting around the park and High Street bridges. And it's been will be submitted to the U.S. Coast Guard, who has the last agency to vet it. They have to make sure that their constituents are okay with the extension of a pathway 10 feet out from the bridge abutments. And then 9/23, I attended the COVID task force. 9/25, I attended the closed session with Brent Ives. And then also on 9/29, attended that closed session regarding the GM selection. And then on 9/30, I attended the subcommittee of the Finance Committee. And on 10/1, I attended the executive board. And that evening, I also attended the retirement for Kip Walsh, which was very, very nice. And then last night, I attended a meeting with ASME 2428.
Okay. Who would like to know? It's Dennis.
Thank you. On the 17th, I attended the Board Operations Committee. On the 18th, I had the great opportunity to go to the Board Land session. That's always a great session, and it was, again, really well done. I attended Paul McCreary's retirement event. And I also, too, attended the United Nations International Day of Peace event, which was beautiful. As Director Rosario said, it was a beautiful event, lots of different people, different cultures, beautiful music, great messages of peace, and something that I want to compliment Mona Coe on, because I'm sure it was her idea that we get involved with this. And for 3 years we've done this now, and she's been the guiding light behind it. And in fact, The foundation was a sponsor of it this year and in the past, and we're going to put in a 12-foot peace pole at Lake Chabot Park, which will be a nice pole that'll be a permanent fixture with messages of peace in, I think, 14 different languages. So it's a beautiful event that hopefully is going to stay with us for a long, long time, and will be the face of that event, at least in southern Alameda County. On the 23rd, I attended the COVID task force meeting. On the 25th and 29th, the Brent Ives workshops or closed sessions. On the 28th, I attended the PAC meeting and was the board representative of the Park Advisory Committee meeting. And on the 30th, I attended East Bay Mud Director Frank Mellon's his sort of annual State of the East Bay Mud, State of Our Water address. And Frank gave a lot of great insight into what's going on with East Bay Mud. You know, with everything else going on in the world, everyone is suggesting we might be going to another drought. And but East Bay Mud is experimenting with recycled water and another lots of innovations. He spoke of the great partnership with the Regional Park District, and it was a very informative event. This weekend, I had the opportunity to go to Lake Chabot Campground, Anthony Chabot Campground. Saw happy campers getting back into the camping and getting out in the woods and having a great time. I would never advocate for it, but boy, having every other campsite was tremendous. None of that, you know, my neighbor's making a lot of noise and their campfire smoke's getting in my eyes. It was, everybody had open spaces, and it was really a great experience, it looked like, for all the people there. The campground was beautiful. I have to compliment Rosario will know what I'm talking about here. There was a guy named Bill Huckabee who worked in the campground 40 years ago, and he would, with a rake and I don't think any power tools, would rake up all the eucalyptus droppings and leaves, branches and detritus, and try to do that on his own. I think this year, if I'm not mistaken, the fuels crew came through there, and it's nicer than I've ever seen it in the 45 years I've been going up there. I also yesterday had the opportunity to meet the general manager at the Redwood Canyon Golf Course, gentleman Will Bonner, great guy, very enthusiastic, and when I was talking to him, he was very aware about the partnership with the Regional Park District and was very pleased with it and happy that he could be part of the whole deal. So I look forward to great things from them.
Thank you, Director Losby. Good to know that someone was raking the forest. long before his time. Thank you. Director Coffey.
Yeah, thank you. On the 17th, I attended a new event I hadn't attended before. It was sponsored by Sustainable Contra Costa. It was the annual Contra Costa County Sustainability Awards. And interesting event, and they do sponsor a lot of great programs through that organization. I attended the land workshop with the rest of you on the 18th. On the 21st, I attended the Contra Costa Special District Association quarterly meeting, and the highlight of that meeting was a presentation by Eric, Lisa, and Yuli on the community survey. And the 2020 survey, much was just presented to us. They did a fabulous job. They're very professional, and the members of the Special District Association much appreciated the presentation. On the 25th, I attended, along with you all, the special board meeting on GM recruitment issues. That evening, I attended the annual Contra Costa Labor Council Labor to Labor event. On the 26th, the highlight of my month, I got to attend Congressman DeSaulnier's annual pre-election event, and his special guest was Sully Sullenberger. And I was starstruck, pure fanboy, and I wish I was there and could get autographs. I was very excited by that. I also attended that Saturday, the Hercules Democratic Club event, and made a brief presentation on fire protection issues. That community is, as most of our communities, very concerned about fire dangers, and particularly the history along that Highway 4 corridor between Hercules and Martinez, Franklin Canyon, Briones, and Crockett, that whole area. And I was happily able to describe the mutual aid agreements and the coordinated mitigation and response programs of the various fire agencies that are responsible for that area. The annual Contra Costa County Democratic Party barbecue was on the 27th, only without a barbecue. So they did have a nice virtual background. There, I know there was a really exciting feature presentation video of Director Eccles that was everyone really glommed onto. It was a really good job, Elizabeth. The second special board meeting on GM recruitment issues was on the 29th, and I attended that meeting. The Finance Committee on the 30th, very full and very good meeting with actions taken tonight stemming from that meeting. That was the 30th. On the evening of the 30th, I attended Senator Skinner's annual birthday event, and her special guest was Congresswoman Karen Bass. That was an interesting event and informative. I also attended the retirement celebration for Kip Walsh on October 1st, and later that evening, the Contra Costa County Mayor's Conference meeting. That covers it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Wieskamp.
I love it. A barbecue where you have no calories. You should be grateful.
Yeah, there are advantages to that.
Unless you provided it home. Okay. September 17th with operations. The 18th, the workshop as always on land. We learned so much. The 25th was a closed session with Ives. 28th was a special LAFCO meeting we had. The 29th was again a meeting with on the recruitment. Same day we had an LARPD meeting. And then on October 1st was the exec meeting. I just reached out and found our park staff works hard. It's hard to track them down and talk to them sometime. Gordon was his usual self at good old Mission Peak. He said that it was busy, but not too bad, only that he had had a little cow problem with one individual. He said we might need to look at whether we have cattle up in that upper section this time of the year. Anyway, I'll trust him to follow up on that. And he said the Sunol, Ohlone are both still closed because Ohlone still needs cleanup from Cal Fire. So there's the fires keep going on. Rick at Del Val made special thanks to Shelley for spending, I think, a whole day with him going over things. We agreed that no one knows more about Del Val than Shelley, and she's willing to help them out. They said the opening was fine, that they were nervous about it, but everybody was ready. And of course, what comes along at the last minute, the blue-green algae. But he said everybody was being very cooperative and they were just darn pleased to be there again. Whether it's our park, a state park, or whatever, let me tell you, people love Del Val. That's it.
Thank you very much, Director Wieskamp. Director Eccles.
Yes, hello. It's gonna, I feel like going almost last. Everybody else has said many of these events, but I will just chime in with my calendar as well. So of course, on the 18th, attended the board workshop on land. It was fabulous. On the 25th, attended the special closed session on GM transition. And as you've heard from others, that was with our facilitator, Brent Ives, very interesting and helpful. On the 25th, attended the 22nd annual Contra Costa Labor to Labor virtual event. And on the 27th, as you've heard from Colin, attended the Democratic Party Contra Costa County virtual barbecue. And to the point about having a barbecue without food, when I told my daughter I was going downstairs to attend the barbecue, the Democratic Party barbecue on Zoom, she said, "Oh, can I come?" You know, food. There's not going to be any food. And she said, "Well, you have to eat something. It's a barbecue." But anyway, so yeah. But it was a good event and a lot of great speakers. I particularly enjoyed hearing Mark Desaulnier, Congressman Mark Desaulnier, spoke at length about his observations of everything happening in Washington, and that was really quite interesting, quite insightful. And then I also attended the event for Senator Nancy Skinner, her birthday event on the 30th. And I think I skipped on the 29th, another special closed session on GM transition. On October 1st, the retirement party for Kip Walsh. And again, very, very sorry to see her leaving the district, and wish her well. She's a real gem and I will miss her. And then let's see, this evening, I will be attending a meeting with AFSCME 2428. And so I want to close out by thanking Chief Chaburo again for the quick response to the illegal activities up on Grizzly Peak at the turnouts. As you all know, people had been lighting things on fire and throwing them off the hill, just completely horrible considering the real tremendous fire danger that we have right now. And so really want to thank Chief Chaburo for quickly coordinating with the chiefs from Berkeley, Oakland, and UC Berkeley. And they were able to put the barriers in place to prevent people to park in those turnouts and partying and causing mischief, illegal activities that could really put the entire community in harm's way. So thank you, Chief, for your help with that. Also wanted to thank Chief Tiley and her team for not only working hard in the fires that we've had recently in the parks, but also her work up in the North Bay. I know it's as people have said, it's a really tough fire season already. And we still probably have a ways to go. So thank you everybody for your continued hard work and vigilance, and really my thanks to all of our park staff for continuing to work hard and persevere through what's been a tough year. So really appreciate everybody's help.
Thank you, Director Eccles. Director Lane.
Okay, thank you. First, a couple words about parks. In my family, I have a fisherman who was really eager with his wife to go to Del Val. So, so I hope the algae did not prevent that. He was like, "It's opening. Can we fish?"
Yes.
So, so I was happy about that. And then Sycamore Valley open space. That's my closest park, and I hike there. Not as much as Dennis does Chabot, but I go there pretty regularly. And on one of the main trails, they had an oak tree that fell down and really pretty much stopped everybody going on it. So I got several calls on it, and I had a chance to talk to the supervisor, Matt Moore, about it. And he said, they'd get right to it. They put a sign up, and then he said, but we have to set it up along with our priorities. And I said, oh, tree priorities. And evidently trees are coming down in impressive numbers, and they need to address the trees that are covering roads first. And so, you know, we forget sometimes how long that drought was, and then we had the water, and so many of those trees are still stressed and coming down. Anyway, they cleared it very timely, which I appreciated. And because I was talking to several people about it, there were several that said, you know, I don't go to my gym anymore. I just hike Sycamore Valley open space. And there definitely are a lot more people out there in the park. And today I did go next to the McGee Preserve, which is north of the park. And one of these days we'll add several hundred acres to our park because of that preserve. And had an interesting hike with Seth, who of course would like us to do a few more things than we'd already agreed to. Then in, and then at our Danville Farmers Market, they had quite a cluster of political people in one corner. And I did have a chance to see my Assemblywoman, Rebecca Bar-Khan, and got a lawn sign. And we also are having a pretty vigorous Danville council election this year, since there is an empty seat. Then meetings, I went to the mayor's conference meeting, 2 meetings with Brent Ives, the board meetings, a land workshop, which is definitely one of my favorites. And I just want to thank staff for pulling that together, because there's so much that could be talked about. And I really did have felt like we had a chance to bring up our main projects. So that was good. And then we went to, Anna and I went to LARPD, the liaison meeting, and they have laid off 20% of their staff. So that was really hard to hear. And, you know, this happened after in 2008, 2009, with so many agencies. And I just hope the economic distress that we're looking at is going to, you know, we won't have to lay off people like this. That was not a happy conversation. And I think that's it. With everybody else, I'm doing some campaigning and some paying attention to the national scene, and wish you all well. And goodbye to Kip. So sorry to see you leave.
Thank you very much, Director Lane. So here's my report. On September 16th, I attended the EOC meeting. On September 18th, I also always do enjoy the land session. On September 21st, I also attended the UN Day of Peace, and I just wanted to thank Director Waspy for representing us well in his welcoming remarks and closing remarks. Thank you, Dennis. And on the 21st, later on in the evening, I also attended the Hayward Area Recreation Park District meeting and their celebration for all of the wonderful things that General Manager Paul McCreary accomplished. It was a very nice meeting, and you know, really makes your heart feel good about what an impact he has had on that district. Really, really good guy. On the 23rd, I attended the next EOC meeting. On the 25th, I attended the closed session on GM transition. And later on that evening, I also attended the Labor to Labor Contra Costa County Labor Council dinner. And I wanted to say I was very happy to hear the remarks of Vince Hall, a longtime firefighter in that area. I remember him from when I was very first getting involved in state service. And I was surprised to see he's been there for quite a while. Does a lot of really good stuff. So it was nice to hear his the recognition of all the good things he's done. On the 29th, I also attended the the special board meeting on GM transition as well. And on the 30th, I attended the Finance Committee. October 1st, the Executive Committee. October 1st, I also attended Kip Walsh's retirement, and it was so nice to hear all those heartfelt remarks. It was almost like we were all in the same room together. It's kind of hard to have those kind of, really nice goodbye recognitions without everybody being in the same place. But there was sure a lot of, great remarks and people who've been touched by Kip, and we will definitely miss her, but hopefully she's told us she'll still be around, and people are hoping she may even become a volunteer. So that would be great. And the last meeting to report is last night. I also attended the meeting with 2428. And with that, that's all of the board reports. I do know there are some adjourn in memories that
That's not true.
report. I'm sorry? I just
No, never mind.
So there's some adjourn in memories that board members would like to state, and I'm going to start with one real quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dee Rosario. Does anybody else have any adjournments today? Okay, so I wanted to adjourn in memory today of Ira Jenkins. I did not know Ira personally, but I know that some of you did know him. He was a very strong advocate. He's someone who is the founding member of the Martin Luther King Center in Oakland, and was very involved in the naming of the shoreline for Martin Luther King. And so I understand he was a very strong advocate, and really left his mark, and was someone who really believed in speaking up and advocacy, and also nonviolence, the nonviolence philosophy of Martin Luther King. So let's remember him and the touch he has had on our park district, the very positive touch he's had on our park district. And then briefly, I know I will not be able to do this justice, but I do want to thank the general manager for ordering the flags to fly at half-mast in honor of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She obviously also left quite a legacy and quite a positive figure in our history on so many things, but in particular for the rights of women. And she was a fighter, a very strong advocate, and I'm still just amazed at how her work ethic and fighting through health issues and continue to be a very esteemed lawyer, judge, and member of the Supreme Court. We will also miss her dearly, but her legacy will live on for many, many years. And then I will pass it off to Director Rosario, who has some other adjournments for this afternoon.
Yes, thank you. I would like to honor our most recent retirees, Kip Walsh, of course, who in a very short time has become quite beloved in the Park District, and for her incredible work in rebuilding the HR department, and we will definitely miss her. And I just also wanted to acknowledge Shelley Miller, who I think she was probably born on Del Valle. And
I think she owns it. I think she owns it.
We should rename the park for her.
Maybe a peak or something.
Yeah, I mean, I knew her as a park ranger and firefighter, and as well as did Director Wasby. Incredible woman, and having stayed at Lake Del Valle for that long and survived is a testament to her character. Yeah. And then lastly, I just wanted to honor a memorial in memory of the lifeguard, Andy Lindemann, who passed away. I'm just going to read what the lifeguard service posted on their Facebook page. She was a 5th-year lifeguard. During her 5 years at the East Bay Regional Park District, Andy kept the public safe during the summer while on duty at Contra Loma Regional Park. She showed promise from the very beginning and was awarded the new hire of the year in 2016 for her outstanding performance and dedication. In addition to her lifeguard duties, she was also an enthusiastic instructor who taught swim lessons for many years. Andy was a key player in helping the team representing our lifeguard service win at the 2017 USLA Pacific Northwest Regional Lifeguard Championships. Her strength, skill, and mental toughness led her to achieve the Women's High Point Award that year. Andy was loved and respected by her Contra Loma staff because of her kindness, team spirit, and a great attitude. Her passing is a huge loss to our lifeguard service, and Andy will be dearly missed. Our sincerest thoughts and prayers go out to her family, friends, and fellow lifeguards. And I would like to extend that sentiment from the board as well, and to her family.
Thank you very much, Dee. We all join you in that. Thank you so much for remembering her. She touched many lives, and we thank her for that. And with that, if there's nothing else, we can go ahead and adjourn. We can go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.